Night Shift at the Hospital. Confronting Hidden Evil. Part 4. Dr. Clark's Denial. Morning broke reluctantly over the hospital, its weak light barely cutting through the thick fog that clung to the building. Hannah sat in the cramped staff lounge, cradling a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Dark circles lined her eyes, and her hands trembled as she raised the cup to her lips. She barely noticed the bitter taste. All night, the specter of the grieving woman haunted her, every detail vivid and unshakable. The woman's hollow eyes, the cold air that had enveloped her, and the despair in her voice. It was as if the encounter had left an imprint on Hannah's very soul. The door creaked open, and Dr. Clark stepped inside. His appearance mirrored Hannah's. A haggard face, lines carved deep into his skin, and a weariness that no amount of sleep could cure. Yet there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of hardness, of grim determination. Hannah knew she couldn't keep quiet any longer. She had to tell him. Maybe he would understand. Maybe he had seen it too. "Dr. Clark," she began, her voice low but urgent. He paused mid-stride, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you have a moment? There's something I need to tell you," he sighed and walked over to the coffee pot, filling a cup with shaky hands. "Make it quick, Nurse Evans." We already stretched thin. He didn't look at her as he spoke, and the distance in his voice made her stomach tighten. "It's about last night," Hannah said, choosing her words carefully. I saw someone, a woman. She was wandering the corridors. She said she was looking for her baby." Dr. Clark's movement stilled. For a moment, Hannah thought she saw something, a flicker of recognition, of fear, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He turned slowly, his expression hardening. "What are you talking about?" His voice was low, dangerously so. Hannah's throat tightened, but she forced herself to continue. She wasn't a patient. At least not anymore. She hesitated, searching for the right words. She vanished, like she was never there. "But I felt it, Dr. Clark. The cold, the way the air." "Stop!" His voice cracked like a whip, cutting through the room's uneasy silence. He set down his coffee cup with deliberate care, but his hands were clenched, white-knuckled. "I don't have time for this." "But it's true," Hannah insisted, her voice rising. "I know what I saw. And I'm not the only one. Others have seen her. They've felt something in this hospital." Dr. Clark's eyes blazed, with a mixture of anger and something darker, fear, perhaps. "Do you hear yourself, nurse? Those stories? In a hospital," he stepped closer, his tone dripping with cold fury. "We deal with life and death every day. Real life, real death. Not whatever nonsense you're spouting." "It's not nonsense," Hannah shot back, her voice trembling but resolute. "Something is wrong here. You know it too. You've seen the pattern, the deaths, the way they keep happening. This isn't just bad luck." Dr. Clark's jaw tightened. For a moment he said nothing. Then, with a deliberate slowness that chilled Hannah to the bone, he spoke. "There is no pattern," he said, each word biting and final. "There is no curse, no haunting, no malevolent force. What you saw was the result of exhaustion and grief. I suggest you get some rest before your imagination does more harm than good." His words stung, and tears pricked Hannah's eyes. But beneath the sting was something else, anger. Why was he so quick to dismiss her? Why was he so determined to bury the truth? "You can't pretend this isn't happening," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't just ignore it." Dr. Clark leaned in, his face inches from hers. "I am trying to run a hospital," he hissed. "A hospital that is drowning in tragedy, in loss, in suffering. If you think I have time to entertain your fantasies, you are mistaken. Focus on your job, Nurse Evans. Leave the ghosts to the storytellers." With that, he turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. The door swung shut behind him with a finality that left Hannah breathless. She stood there, her hands balled into fists, her heart pounding. Why was he so afraid to listen? Why did he want to shut her down so desperately? She paced the room, her mind racing. There was more to Dr. Clark's reaction than simple disbelief. He was hiding something. But she could see it in his eyes, hear it in the way his voice wavered, if only for a moment. He knew more than he was letting on, and his refusal to acknowledge it only deepened her resolve. Over the next few days, Hannah tried to focus on her work, but it was impossible to shake the sense of dread that hung over the hospital like a storm cloud. The whispers among the staff grew louder, more frantic. Nurses spoke of cold spots that moved through the halls, of shadows that shouldn't exist. Patients reported seeing figures standing at the foot of their beds, watching with hollow eyes, and always the faint, mournful cry of a baby echoed through the night. Hannah confronted Dr. Clark again, cornering him in the hallway. "You can't keep ignoring this," she said, her voice trembling with desperation. "People are afraid. Something is happening, and you know it." His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but his expression remained stony. "This conversation is over," he said, brushing past her. "Focus on the living, Nurse Evans. Leave the rest to rot." His words echoed in her mind long after he had gone. She knew then that she couldn't rely on him. Whatever was haunting the hospital, whatever darkness had taken root, she would have to face it herself. She would have to find the truth. That night, as Hannah walked the darkened corridors, she felt the cold return. The shadows seemed to move, whispering secrets she couldn't understand. She thought of the spectral woman's play of Dr. Clark's furious denial. Something was wrong in this hospital, something old, something angry, and it was growing stronger. Hannah squared her shoulders and pressed on, the cold biting into her skin. She would find answers. She would uncover whatever Dr. Clark was hiding. And she would not be silenced, not by fear, not by doubt, and certainly not by the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of sight. The fight was only beginning.